Prime Minister Mark Carney says the sudden collapse of his once promising relationship with President Donald Trump is something only the U.S. leader can explain, after what had seemed just weeks ago like a renewed era of cooperation between the two leaders. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Speaking to reporters in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, Carney appeared calm and measured despite the dramatic turn in diplomatic fortunes. In any complicated, high-stakes negotiation, you can get unexpected twists and turns, he said. What matters most is keeping your cool. It doesn't pay to be upset. Emotions don't carry you very far. The Prime Minister's remarks came just days after Trump abruptly called off trade talks with Canada, claiming outrage over a television advertisement aired in Canada that featured former U.S. President Ronald Reagan speaking against the dangers of tariffs. The ad, produced by Ontario Premier Doug Ford's provincial government, used Reagan's 1987 radio address to argue that tariffs often lead to destructive trade wars. The message, however, was not well received in Washington. Trump accused Canada of using fraudulent tactics, claiming on his Truth Social account that the ad misrepresented Reagan's views. They fraudulently took a big buy ad saying that Ronald Reagan did not like tariffs, when actually he loved tariffs for our country and its national security, Trump wrote on Friday, calling the video fake and deceptive. Carney confirmed that he had not spoken with Trump since the U.S. president terminated trade negotiations on Thursday. He described the decision as an unexpected twist, emphasizing that considerable progress had been made on key issues like steel, aluminum, and energy before the talks were halted. Despite Trump's declaration that he had no immediate plans to resume discussions, Carney said Canada remains ready to return to the table, when appropriate, and when our American counterparts are ready. While Trump has ruled out a face-to-face meeting with Carney during next week's APEC summit in South Korea, the Canadian leader said he expects to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, hinting that Ottawa is already exploring other diplomatic and economic options. The diplomatic spat between Carney and Trump stems from Ford's $75 million ad campaign, which began airing on October 16 across major U.S. television networks. Ford said the campaign aimed to remind Americans, especially voters in Republican districts, of Reagan's warnings about protectionism, hoping to pressure Washington into rethinking its trade policies. Ontario is the engine of North American manufacturing, Ford declared when launching the ads. We can't stand by while tariffs destroy jobs on both sides of the border. His province, home to Canada's auto industry, has been hit especially hard by Trump's escalating tariffs. However, Trump took personal offense at the campaign. After the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute issued a statement saying the ad misrepresents Reagan's message, Trump went a step further, accusing Canada as a whole of trying to influence an upcoming Supreme Court case on presidential authority over emergency tariffs. Over the weekend, Trump escalated tensions further, telling reporters on his way to Kuala Lumpur that Canada's been playing dirty, and warning, I can play dirtier than they can. In an attempt to calm the storm, Ford announced on Friday that his government would pull the ads after the weekend, allowing them to air only a few more times during the first two games of the World Series. But the move backfired. Trump reportedly demanded the ads come down immediately, and his anger led to a new 10% tariff on Canadian imports announced Saturday. As the situation continues to unfold, Carney has been careful to distance his federal government from Ford's actions. It is the sole responsibility of the Government of Canada to engage in trade negotiations with the United States, he clarified firmly. That's the best way forward. Despite Trump's fiery rhetoric, Canadian officials say they remain hopeful that diplomatic channels can be reopened in the near future. Behind the scenes, advisors on both sides are reportedly assessing the damage to what had recently been a surprisingly cordial relationship, one that now hangs in the balance over a single, controversial ad campaign. The sun was blazing over Kuala Lumpur as Prime Minister Mark Carney stepped into the marble-lined conference hall of the ASEAN summit, his expression calm yet unreadable. Cameras flashed, microphones jostled toward him, and journalists fired questions about the sudden collapse of what had once seemed like a blossoming friendship between him and President Donald Trump. Just weeks earlier, the two leaders had stood side by side in Washington, smiling for the cameras, trading compliments, and declaring a renewed era of cooperation between Canada and the United States. But that goodwill now seemed to have evaporated overnight, replaced by confusion, anger, and political theater that neither side could easily explain. Carney's face betrayed no emotion as he answered. In any complicated, high-stakes negotiation, you can get unexpected twists and turns, he said, his tone measured, as if deliberately refusing to give the story more fuel. What matters most is keeping your cool. It doesn't pay to be upset. Emotions don't carry you very far. His words were a quiet contrast to the storm raging across social media and in political circles back home. Just days earlier, President Trump had abruptly called off all trade talks with Canada, stunning diplomats in both Ottawa and Washington. The reason, according to the president's fiery post on Truth Social, was a political ad that had aired in the United States, an ad that dared to invoke the legacy of Ronald Reagan. Produced not by the Canadian federal government, but by Ontario Premier Doug Ford's provincial administration, the commercial used a clip from one of Reagan's 1987 radio addresses warning about the dangers of excessive tariffs and the risk of trade wars. The ad's message was simple but pointed: protectionism destroys jobs, and free trade builds prosperity. Yet somehow, this piece of nostalgia managed to ignite an international incident. Trump erupted on social media, calling the ad fake and fraudulent, accusing Canada of twisting Reagan's words to attack his economic policies. They fraudulently took a big buy ad saying that Ronald Reagan did not like tariffs, Trump posted, his words in all caps for emphasis, when actually he loved tariffs for our country and its national security. In one breath, the progress of months of trade negotiations seemed to vanish. What had been described as constructive and hopeful talks on steel, aluminum, and energy sectors were now dead in the water. Carney, speaking carefully to reporters, confirmed that he had not spoken to Trump since the president terminated the talks. It was, in his words, an unexpected twist, especially given how much ground had already been covered at the negotiating table. The two sides had been close to breakthroughs, officials had whispered, agreements that could have eased the burden on industries suffering from high tariffs. But now, all of that was gone, swept away by a storm of political outrage and personal pride. Trump, meanwhile, declared that he had no plans to resume negotiations with Canada for a while, leaving Carney to signal patience and composure. "We are ready when appropriate," the Prime Minister said. "When our American counterparts are ready, we will be too." Yet as Carney prepared for his next stop, the upcoming APEC summit in South Korea, Trump made it clear that he had no intention of meeting him there. The snub was unmistakable. Instead, Carney announced that he expected to meet with another heavyweight of global politics, China's President Xi Jinping, a meeting that would inevitably send its own quiet message across the Pacific. The heart of this diplomatic fallout lay not in Ottawa, but in Toronto, where Doug Ford, Canada's populist premier, had proudly unveiled a $75 million ad campaign on October 16. The campaign's goal, Ford said, was to remind Americans, particularly Republican voters, of Reagan's belief in free trade and the dangers of tariffs. Ford's province, Ontario, forms the industrial backbone of Canada's economy, home to its auto sector and much of its manufacturing base, both of which had been hit hard by Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs. Ford's message was intended to be one of economic unity across the border. Ontario is the engine of North American manufacturing, Ford had declared when the ads launched. "We can't stand by while tariffs destroy jobs on both sides of the border." But what Ford saw as an appeal to reason, Trump saw as a personal attack. After the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute issued a statement claiming that the ad misrepresented Reagan's 1987 address, Trump's fury grew. He accused Canada, not Ford's provincial government, of orchestrating the ad to influence an upcoming U.S. Supreme Court case that would decide whether a president had the authority to unilaterally impose tariffs under emergency powers. The claim was explosive, and it instantly shifted what had been a domestic political stunt into an international flashpoint. Over the weekend, Trump told reporters that Canada had been playing dirty, his words sharp and ominous. "But I can play dirtier than they can," he warned, leaving little doubt that retaliation was coming. By Saturday, the retaliation arrived. Trump announced an additional 10% tariff on Canadian goods, though he offered no details on which products would be affected. The move blindsided Canadian officials and sent markets briefly trembling. For Carney, it was a direct challenge not only to his government's diplomatic patience but to his leadership on